So a bit of breaking news coming in the last couple of minutes or so, and it regards the WWE Monday Night Raw lead play-by-play announcer, now former WWE Monday Night Raw lead play-by-play announcer, because it has been announced that WWE and Adnan Virk have parted ways after just a couple of weeks with Adnan Virk being in the position as the lead play-by-play guy of Monday Night Raw. WWE has released a very, very, very short statement about this. This was just breaking at least 2 or 3 minutes ago, but WWE have said, quote, WWE and Adnan Virk have mutually agreed to part ways. WWE thanks Adnan for his work, end quote. That's it. That is literally it. That is literally all WWE have posted. That's what the tweet says on social media. That's what the post says on WWE.com. That's it. Now, again, you'll have to bear with me because this is a bit of a breaking story, so more could come out about this in the coming moments whilst I'm recording this right now. It's not surprising, to be honest with you. It's really not surprising at all. It's a really brief period. He obviously came into WWE just after WrestleMania. That's what, 4 or 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, if that. And it's not surprising. It's not surprising. And it's kind of a case of, like I said on social media, I just posted a tweet about it, just like that, Adnan Virk is gone. And just how quickly that he came into the company is just how quickly he's left. Now, I've said this a couple of times. I did the Raw post-show reaction last night, and I spoke about Adnan Virk because a couple of the times, some of the stuff that he's saying on the show, and I get it, it's not necessarily his fault because he was put into this position, but it was really, really, really apparent, the guy didn't have a clue. He just did not have a clue about WWE. He spoke about when he first came into the company that he was... You know, he grew up watching pro wrestling as a kid, and he spoke about Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan and those kind of names. But it was really, really apparent that the position of lead play-by-play announcer for Monday Night Raw was not for him, because he didn't have a clue. He did not have a clue about the product. He didn't know a lot of the names of the stars. He didn't know a lot of the names about the wrestlers. He just did not have a clue. And whilst it's never nice to see anyone lose a position, he still has a position. I think he does baseball or something like that. I mean, he used to work for ESPN previously. Prior to coming to this, he was let go by ESPN because there was an issue about him. I believe it was something like leaking news or leaking information to the press, which I said at the time. You can go back and check it on the channel, and I still stand by this now, that that's not the guy you want to come in, because WWE has more leaks than the Titanic anyway when it comes to information. So why would you want to bring in a guy with that kind of reputation? I don't know. Nevertheless, there was this feeling, I guess, that he's a name from baseball. I'm not a baseball fan. I'm over here in the UK. We don't really watch baseball over here, so I don't know who he is or was or anything like that. Nevertheless, there was a feeling, I suppose, that he was a credible sports announcer, and because he was a credible sports announcer, he could lend some credibility to the Raw product and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, it was just really obvious, really apparent. The guy didn't have a clue. He was not familiar at all with the product, and he's gone. It was just not a good fit. He's not a good fit. John Alba, who is a local Florida reporter, he's been very close to WWE over the course of the last 18 months or so. Of course, that they've been based in Florida, the Performance Center, the Thunderdomes, all of WWE's residencies, WrestleMania inside Raymond James Stadium. John Alba's just tweeted, quote, "I was working on reporting this earlier today, but it appears WWE has announced it. It was just not a good fit. There was frustration. It's unfortunate because he's a heck of a broadcaster, just didn't fit." Now, because there are going to be people, and again, you have to look at these kind of things when they come out. I don't think there's any doubt about it that he's probably a good broadcaster in what he does. Again, I don't know. I don't know Adnan Virk's work in baseball, so I don't know. I couldn't say whether or not he's a good broadcaster. I'm sure you don't work for ESPN in the past and not be good in terms of being a sports broadcaster and all that kind of stuff. That's probably fair to say. But it wasn't a good fit. And he can say that he's a pro wrestling fan from when he was younger, and he can say that I used to watch Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan and all that kind of stuff. He wasn't good. Last night, I mentioned that there were so many times where he obviously didn't know the moves, he didn't know the characters, he didn't know the wrestlers, he didn't know the stories, and he would just scream, "Oh, baby, oh, wow, amazing." And he didn't know. He just didn't know. He was referring to Kofi Mania last night. He went, "How great was Kofi Mania back in the day?" Back in the day? That was 2 years ago. And I know people can respond to that, and people did respond to that. We can say, well, In the world of professional wrestling, 2 years is a lifetime. It is back in the day, but come on, back in the day, it was 2 years ago. And he called, Braun Strowman hit a power slam, and he called it the running power slam. I remember Omos had just won the the Raw Tag Team Championship at WrestleMania. And one of the first, I think it was when they come back to television, because Omos and AJ Styles weren't on TV for a few weeks. And Omos has that, and AJ Styles have that tag team match, I think, with the New Day again. And Adnan Virk says, wow, is Omos one of the greatest WWE champions of all time? And it's like, oh God, it's the Mike Adamle. It's Mike Adamle over again, of getting these guys in that are great broadcasters. No doubt about that. They're great broadcasters, but they're not pro wrestling broadcasters. It's just a different kettle of fish. It's a completely different... It's a different job. And the idea, and I thought WWE, to be honest, I thought they would have learned their lesson when it comes to this, because they've made this mistake several times at this point. They made it with Mike Adamle. They've made it so many times over the years where they bring in these guys that were sports broadcasters, or they have a history doing baseball or American football or whatever, and they think, well, they can do sports broadcasting. They'll come in and do WWE. It'll be easy. And it never is, because in the same vein that, I don't know, if you're not me, right? If I don't know anything about, about Major League Baseball or anything like that, right? In the same vein that if I tried to do videos talking about baseball, you would say, oh, and you're terrible at it because you don't know baseball. And I would say that's true. And it was the same with Adnan Virk. He can't do pro wrestling commentary because he doesn't know pro wrestling. It's not that hard. And they've made this mistake over and over again. You would think they would learn their lesson. And everyone said at the time, when Tom Phillips was replaced by Adnan Virk, this guy better be good because Tom Phillips is very good. And even those guys, Tom Phillips or even Vic Joseph or whoever, when they do commentary for WWE, they have to go through the system in the sense that they have to go to NXT because they have to become familiar with the product. They have to become familiar with calling pro wrestling. It's not like Mauro Ranallo, where he was calling pro wrestling anyway, in addition to calling boxing or MMA or anything like that. Mauro Ranallo, frankly, is just a freak, and he's one of the best broadcasters in the world in anything of all combat sports, let alone pro wrestling. And it was just brutally apparent when it came to Adnan Virk that the guy just didn't have a clue. And it wasn't a good fit. And to be honest, I don't blame him. I really don't blame him. It's not his fault. What's he supposed to say? He's supposed to try his best, and he's supposed to do what he can. But he was put in a position by the company where he was never, ever, ever going to succeed. And if people thought he was going to succeed, then they're just completely naive, because you could listen to this guy call professional wrestling for 5 minutes and you would realize that he wasn't ready for that spot. Now, it's one thing if Adnan Virk had come in and maybe called main events, or he'd call NXT UK or call whatever, or if there's the new NXT Evolve brand, if he called that, just something where there aren't as many people watching, there isn't that amount of scrutiny, you can kind of learn the ropes, you can kind of develop, get familiar with the product, get familiar with the superstars, get familiar with some moves, because the guy really didn't know any moves unless it was a finisher that was written in front of him. I mean, at some points you could see him with a piece of paper with all of the roster on, like on WWE.com, and he's just looking at them going, okay, Randy Orton, he's got the RKO, he's from St. Louis, Missouri, he's a 14-time world champion. He's reading off these bullet points because that's all he's got, because he didn't know pro wrestling. And it's just, you look at it and it's laughable, frankly. It is laughable. Why would you have, I'm trying to think of a good example. If you had, I don't know, Byron Saxton. I don't know if he's an NFL fan, but if you went Byron Saxton, call NFL games, and you'd be like, well, I don't know about NFL. I don't follow the sport. Oh, you can pick it up after time. Can you? I don't know. And Monday Night Raw is a 3-hour broadcast. There is no place to hide when you're doing that. It's 3 hours, it's live, you've got Vince McMahon in your ear, you've got a social media following of people that will tell you if they don't like what you're doing very, very quickly, and it was just very apparent that the guy wasn't ready for that position. It wasn't a good fit. And whilst people can blame Adnan Virk, I don't really know if I blame him. I don't know if he tried or not. I don't know. Did he improve? Maybe a little bit, but he still obviously was miles off the pace and just didn't have a clue. But again, is that necessarily his fault? You have to look at the people that put this guy in the position that he was in. And by all accounts, this was a Nick Khan hire. Nick Khan is the new president of WWE. And it was a Nick Khan hire to hire Adnan Virk and get an outside guy from outside of the world of professional wrestling in terms of sports broadcasting and bring him over and make it work. We're going to make WWE seem very mainstream, and we're going to make WWE feel like sports and like the MLB and all that kind of stuff. And it didn't work. We've tried this before. If you're a pro wrestling fan, if you're a WWE fan, you would know we've tried this before. It hasn't worked. It didn't work then. Why would it work now? There is no difference. There is no difference. And not wanting to be harsh, but I think any pro wrestling fan could have listened to that first episode of Adnan Virk after WrestleMania, that post-Raw, post-Mania edition of Monday Night Raw on the USA Network. They could have listened to him for 3 hours and went, man, this guy ain't good, because it's very apparent this guy doesn't know the product. He really doesn't know the product. It was that quick. He didn't know the product. And everyone could have told you that you can't, in the world of pro wrestling, you can't BS the fans. You can't BS that you know what you're talking about and not back it up. It was very apparent he didn't know. And I suppose when it comes to Adnan Virk as well, I do want to touch on this because I found the story quite laughable, frankly, when I first saw it, is that he did an interview, I think, with someone, or I don't know if it was an interview or a report. Regardless, there was something where he said to people that obviously in the world of pro wrestling, the idea that there's a ton of crossover between pro wrestling and baseball, there probably is quite a lot of pro wrestling fans that like baseball and all that kind of stuff, but not a lot of people knew who Adnan Virk was. I didn't. I mean, I'm based over here in the UK, but I suppose a lot of people didn't know who this guy was, and he was really surprised by this. I can't believe no one doesn't know who I am. I think everyone would know who I am. I'm Adnan Virk. All right, check your ego at the door. And again, I don't really want to speculate on stuff like this, but because I don't think it's fair, and I don't want to make stuff up or anything like that. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? It does make you wonder in the sense that this was a guy that didn't know anything about the product, and he had a very uphill learning curve really quickly. He had to pick things up quick. He wasn't good to start off with. I think people gave him the benefit of the doubt and saying, look, he might not know the product right now. He shouldn't be in this position. It's not the right fit. He's obviously out of his depth, but if he applies himself over the course of the next few weeks, tries to learn more about the product, tries to learn more about the superstars, the moves, and the storytelling, all that kind of stuff, if you're showing signs of improvement, the fans will try and give you some form of credit, or they'll give you some form of leeway. Michael Cole's a great example of that. Is Michael Cole still the greatest announcer of all time? Probably not. But you look at the guy's career in WWE, and the reason he stuck around for so long is there was an effort for him to try and learn the product, to try and learn the moves of the wrestlers, to try and learn the wrestlers' names, and to work with people like Vince McMahon and Jim Ross and all that kind of stuff. And it makes you wonder, was that desire there from Adnan Virk? Because he still does have baseball. He still does do baseball commentary. And maybe it was just a case of he just decided, you know what? I don't need this. I don't need a crazy 70-something-year-old man in my ear screaming at me. I don't need social media hating me, telling me I'm terrible every week when I just don't know the product. I was told that, it would be fine, and, they would help me learn it, and you'll get there eventually. Maybe he just didn't want the agita of that. Maybe he didn't want all of this kind of stuff and went, you know what? I'm a baseball commentator. I should just probably stick to baseball because I don't know the product. I don't care to know the product. To be honest with you, if he's watching that product on Monday Night Raw on Monday, he'd be like, I don't want to learn more about this product, especially watching last night's episode. He'd be like, why would I want to learn more about this? It's terrible. Maybe, I don't know. And I know people might look at it and say, well, are WWE and Vince McMahon looking at that episode last night, and is Adnan Virk a casualty of that? Raw's problems are far bigger than Adnan Virk. Adnan Virk had nothing to do with the show being terrible last night. There were certainly some questionable lines, which you and I noted during the reaction stream of that was terrible, but the guy was just out of his depth. He just didn't have a clue, and it wasn't a good fit. And I have no doubt, as I mentioned before, that the guy is a good broadcaster. I have no doubt that he's very good at calling baseball because that's what he knows. That's what he likes. In the same way, I couldn't tell you anything about jewelry or art because that's not my speciality. That's not my expertise. And pro wrestling wasn't his expertise. People like Tom Phillips, people like Corey Graves. I mean, bless Corey Graves, because he was moved from a great position on SmackDown on Fox, the most watched show in WWE, and on a network television show. He was moved from SmackDown to Raw to help Adnan Virk. That was his job. I noted this in my notes last night when I was talking about Raw. One of the things I noted was that Corey Graves was essentially calling the show. Corey Graves was essentially doing play-by-play. It wasn't Adnan Virk. Honestly, it really wasn't Adnan Virk doing commentary for that show. It was Corey Graves. Corey Graves is calling the spots, and then Byron Saxon's doing a bit of analysis. Adnan Virk's just kind of there screaming, going, "Oh, baby. Oh, wow. What a maneuver." He's doing a bad Vince McMahon impression. So I feel bad for Corey Graves because he lost his spot on SmackDown to help try and get this guy to settle in and help get this guy over. That was an impossible job. I mean, really an impossible job for Corey Graves. And now he's stuck on Raw in a worse product and on a worse show and a less viewed show. I mean, I feel bad for him. I mean, you could say that it was an indication of faith by WWE that they put Corey Graves in this position to help Adnan Virk, but he was unhelpable. He was unhelpable, and he was never ready for that job. People like, as I mentioned, Tom Phillips, Vic Joseph, they've stayed in NXT for years. Corey Graves was in NXT for years, and he was familiar with the product. Really familiar with the product, and he stayed in NXT for years because you have to get familiar and you have to have a certain voice and a certain tone and a way of telling stories and being familiar and reacting in the right ways, and Adnan Virk obviously wasn't the right fit. And again, is that his fault? Not really. He was just completely out of his depth. They offered him a job, he took it. I'm sure the money was good, and I'm sure he thought the exposure was good, and it was another string to his bow and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't right for him. He wasn't the right guy. He was out of his depth. That's not really his fault. That's the fault of the people that decided to hire him. He would have done tryouts as well. He would have done tryouts. This isn't just a guy that was just, they saw him on, baseball and went, let's hire him. He worked for ESPN. They would have done tryouts, and they obviously thought that he could succeed. And this is a Nick Khan hire that has failed miserably, absolutely miserably. And now the pressure will be on Nick Khan. Nick Khan isn't not going to be the president of WWE because of Adnan Virk's failing, but it's another example, and this happens quite a lot with WWE when you get people in executive positions and they try and put their own spins and their own hires and they fail and it doesn't look good. Triple H is a great example. Triple H, when he started to come into an executive position in WWE. Remember the talent he brought in? First was Awesome Kong, Karma, and then was Sin Cara, Mystico, and they both didn't work out. Mystico was a massive flop because of botches and because of suspensions and all that kind of stuff. Karma was more unfortunate because she was there, but then she got pregnant and then she left, and it didn't look good on Triple H, in the same vein that this signing doesn't look good for Nick Khan. And I'm surprised maybe it's ended this quickly, but it's not surprising that the guy was let go. I think most people, if they were going to bet after a couple of weeks of listening to Adnan Virk, they went, it's a matter of time before the guy goes. A matter of time because the guy doesn't have it. The guy doesn't have it. He doesn't obviously know the product. He doesn't know the company, and it's a matter of time. It's an absolute matter of time, and that was it. That was it. So, We'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. And WWE's public relations have just retweeted this as well. And I guess we'll have to wait and see who replaces him. Who do I think replaces him? I guess Tom Phillips would come back in. He was promoted into sort of overseeing the announcers anyway, so maybe he comes back in. Maybe Vic Joseph goes back to Monday Night Raw. I would probably assume that Tom Phillips goes back. Time will tell. Time will tell. Maybe they hire someone else. I don't know. It's just... It was an unnecessary change to the announce team. It kind of came out of nowhere anyway, and this is the right call for all parties involved. So we'll have to wait and see. But look, guys, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on Adnan Virk and WWE mutually parting ways? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So be sure to get involved in the community. Drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.